Alright, hello everybody. I did not expect to be making this video today. So, you remember the Alien Omnibus, Volume 1 that I got? And I did reviews of each of the three books in series. The same friend that gave me that book, author of The Good Guy, gave me this one too. And, I wasn't planning on reviewing this week. But then sometime last week, I was in some kind of situation, I forget what it was, where I needed where I had to waste half an hour and I couldn't be doing anything else, and I just needed something to while away half an hour. And so I thought, what the hell, I'll grab this and I'll take a quick look at it and I'll see if there's anything to this. And gosh, it is so this book is Alien: The Cold Forge by Alex White, and this book was released in, I guess, 2018. So much later than the three books that I've read that are earlier in the Alien novelization or novel series, because technically those novelizations were novelizations of comic books. And anyway, it's a giant Hollywood intellectual property. So it has a whole bunch of spin-offs and stuff. But this book advertises itself as an all-new story and an original novel, which indeed it is. It starts out with a couple of member berries. There's someone mentions Van Leeuwen and someone mentions Carter Burke. But other than that, it is actually an original story with original characters and all that stuff. And again, it was not my intention to read this week, but I started looking at it and it gave me such a weird first impression that I kept reading it, and I don't know, it's one of those things where it did just enough to keep me turning the pages, and I don't know, it's not a great book. It's good. It does do some interesting things, but it is surprising that I actually finished this, considering what a bad first impression it makes. So let me get onto that. First off, practically everyone in this book is some kind of sociopath, and usually the weird sex obsessed type, which is also kind of off-putting. It's very edgy and gritty and dark and but at the same time, the prose is pretty decent, and the grittiness is done somewhat well in places, but often it's taken to kind of an absurd extreme. Another thing about this book that gave me a bad first impression was that it's written in the present tense, which is, in a novel, it's kind of reminds me of Try Hard nonsense, right? Oh, I'm gonna make this book in present tense because, every other book is written in past tense, and it's well, whatever. You can do present tense stuff for a good reason, but for a book that takes place in an alternate universe in the future on a space station 30 parsecs away from Earth, the present tense isn't giving me any more sense of urgency. Once you get used to everything being in present tense, except for the small points where someone is remembering something someone is remembering something now that happened previously, and that's in the past tense. Once you get past that little bit of linguistic bleh, it's not it's much harder to read, but it's a group of awful people in a dystopian future on a faraway space station, and a little bit of present tense isn't going to help me connect with these characters even more. It's writing a novel in present tense is cutting your fingernails blindfolded with a Bowie knife when there's a nail clipper set right within reach. Yes, you can do it. And it does require a little extra skill, but there are so many more opportunities to make mistakes and, really screw things up. The consequences can be severe. On the plus side, it turns out that it looks like Alex White, the author of this book, doesn't screw up the present tense writing as far as I could tell. It seems pretty consistent, and the present tense is where the present tense should be, and occasional past tense is where the past tense could be, but it doesn't impress me as something that oh, this book's written in present tense. That's, it's a very shallow kind of look at my writing skill. Anybody could do it with enough time and attention and editing. and it doesn't add anything to the story per se. So, why is it there? Well, it's there to buck trends or buck convention, and doing that for a reason is one thing, but doing that for basically no reason is another. Now, on the plus side, this book does have some really cool ideas in it, and Alex White plays around with some of the alien ideas in very interesting ways, which is one of the real good points about this book. Unfortunately, because it's kind of an offshoot, a side story, whatever, it's not clear immediately that these cool ideas are going to be utilized to any major or useful effect in the long run. I mean, this is kind of the problem with writing a novel that's already in a well-known sci-fi universe. There's a kind of inertia, right? You like the changes that Alex White made to the alien life cycles details in this book are never going to show up in a movie, probably, which is unfortunate because there are some good ideas in here, but like, because it's in the alien universe, turning this into some kind of canon, book would mess up a bunch of other things, which means that it would, screw up the lore. What this could have been, and of course it wouldn't have sold as well, so maybe you don't want to do this, but what this could have been is it could have been a clever parody, where everyone's always referencing the aliens, and they're like, oh, it's a lot like the aliens, remember from those movies back in the 20th century? Yada, yada, yada. Like, that would have been excellent. Or like, it's a lot like the alien, the alien from those movies back hundreds of years ago. Oh yeah, those were really popular back in the day. These are kind of like that, but it's different because of this, or because of this, or because of this, and of course, it all happens in universe, but only in universe of the books, because none of the things that Alex White does with the alien life cycle are going to be repeated anywhere else, except possibly in other Alex White books, maybe. Or maybe there's some side universe that I don't know about, where there's a bunch of books written with this alternate like life cycle thing. And to be fair, like, the alien life cycle thing is not something that has been perfectly clear from the word go, right? There's a deleted scene in the movie Alien, right, where it shows I think Brett and Dallas being turned into eggs, right? And then that scene was deleted from the movie, but you can see it in like special edition DVDs or Blu-rays or wherever you can look up deleted scenes. But then when James Cameron got his hand on the Alien franchise and made Aliens, he just kind of went with more of like a standard, kind of ant hive kind of life cycle with facehuggers involved, right? Which is, scary, but it gets rid of the body horror aspects that were present in the original movie and, what's his name? Giger's original conception of the alien, right? And so whatever. One thing that this book also does really well is that, how do I put it? I was halfway through this book and I thought it was over. And I was like, there literally can't be much else in this book. Like, what else are you going to do in this book? And then what the author, Alex White, does is he actually takes, because like the first half of the book takes place over the course of, I'm going to say probably a couple of weeks kind of thing. And then like the last, let's say 2 to 4 hours are expanded in such an insanely, honestly, effective way that he managed to get another 200 pages out of those 4 hours when he's done, 2 weeks in 200 pages, and then 2 hours in 200 pages is kind of the way that this book goes, time-wise, organizational-wise, which is actually a kind of a thing that I think is a recognizable and important skill, right? The ability to find the most important and the most gripping parts of a story and to expand on them. So that's something that I think, writers of any stripe can learn from this book, which is one of the points in its favor, definitely. And of course the problem is that, and of course this isn't done perfectly either, because the problem is that if you like actually look at the plot very carefully, as I had to do after I finished reading the book, I'm like, oh, that was all right. And then I sat down and I kind of was like, wait a minute, none of this makes any sense. It's like, If you look at the plot very carefully, it's some of the most absurd, nonsensical stuff that I've ever seen. And I've seen, a lot of pulp and stuff like that where things are pretty crazy. Um, and then again, on the plus side, we have good prose, it's descriptive, it's vivid, it's gritty. There's lots of slang and patois, but not patois, it's just slang. There's lots of slang, but it's pretty decently done. I mean, the characters have development, but unfortunately, there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We start with a bunch of sociopaths on an obscure space station, and we end with far fewer sociopaths who have had a harrowing experience. I mean, it was good enough to sit down and read. And when I was, on the downside, when I was done reading, the feeling was a little bit more of like, what did I just read than anything else? Which is not to say that it doesn't have its good points, but like, it was not. I don't know. It was very pulpy in a way. I guess you would put it that way. So anyway, I think that's what I want to say right now for the non-spoiler section. So let's get into the spoilers, and I'll explain a little bit more about why this book, about the ups and downs of this book in more detail if you want to see that. Otherwise, skip to the conclusion. Here we go. All right, spoiler time. So this book follows two main characters. One of them is a guy named Dorian Sudler. He's kind of like a corporate stop-loss guy. He has this Ted Bundy charisma. He's an absolute psychopathic manipulator, and he's there to. He goes to various places for Weyland-Yutani to kind of get things going and fire the people that need to be fired, kind of thing. But taken to a ridiculous caricature of that kind of thing. And then, so the first Alien book that I referenced had this really cool reference to, what's his name? Ambrose Bierce's An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, Owl Creek Bridge, I think. And it was actually kind of cool. And it was hey, a literary reference in this book. And I think that Alex White tried to do the same thing, but did it poorly with this one, because the character named Dorian is obsessed with portraits, and maybe not obsessed, but doing portraits is a big part of what he does, and a big part of his thought process and a lot of things, I want to paint this or whatever, and it's a character named Dorian interested in portraits. Oh, get it? It's no, fine, whatever. But okay, so he gets sent to this remote, top-secret space station that's orbiting a star called Kaufman, I believe, and his job is to figure out how to make it profitable again. Now, first off, these kinds of black ops kind of, skunk works things don't make sense to treat them it doesn't make sense to treat them on a short-term basis. And any company that actually treats them on a short-term basis is going to fail in the long run anyway. So even in a dystopian alien universe, crazy hyper-capitalism, whatever this is supposed to be, it doesn't make sense to treat these, skunkworks operations as if, well, they're not profitable this year, and so we need to close it down and put it under new management. It's no, that's an idiotic thing. I mean, venture capitalism is certainly a thing, and the way that it works is that you have a bunch of things where 99% of them fail, and then one of them pays out to cover the rest of them, right? That's a real thing that happens. Or you have long-term projects that require someone to research something and develop something for multiple years. And if you just said, well, how much have we profited in this year on a 5-year project? It's a nonsensical criterion, because it's well, no, the payout comes at the end of the process. We need to do the research, and then the reason that we're putting some money, but not all our money, but some money into this research is because we believe that there's a possibility that something good will come out at the end. That's all completely ignored in kind of a caricature way, which is another one of those things that makes a lot of these books a little bit irritating. It's well, your project to cure cancer didn't make a profit this year. I mean, yeah, you think that you're, 70% of the way to a cure of this particular type of cancer, and that cure, if it was completed, would make us billions, but you didn't make any money this year, and so you're fired. It's no, that's not how any rational actor would work. But even worse than that it's not just that this space station holds one weird Skunkworks project, it holds three. And like it's literally a giant space station circling a giant star, really, really close to the star because it's really, really hot. And there's multiple scenes where like, oh, we have to go out on the outside of the hull and we have to wear this EVA suit that has this, reflector on the back that's really heavy and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, you put the Alien project and the weaponized AI project in the same place, and then you had the main scientist working on the Alien project work in the same area as the Rogue AI project, and you have her working with a radio controlled synthetic person that the connection is secured. Well, I mean, this space station is literally designed to blow itself up, is basically the conclusion that you come to when you actually sit back and look at it. And of course, Sudler, when he gets there, he immediately starts deciding that most of the people here have to go. He starts pitting them against each other and like manipulating them to attack each other, in a professional sense, right? Your project is stupid. No, your project is stupid. That kind of stuff. The other main character is a doctor named Blue Marsalis, who is leading this Alien project, and this is actually kind of interesting. She is nearly dead from a genetic disease, and she spends most of her time kind of remote piloting a synthetic person. And, they use the word SCIF, S-C-I-F, Secure Compartmentalized Information something or other. And, she's remote controlling this synthetic in the SCIF through radio control, and they say that her connection is secured, but that's not actually how a real SCIF works. I mean, SCIFs work. I worked in a building that had a SCIF. They actually Faraday cage the whole thing so that like transmissions cannot get in or out. And if you're like, and if you're in a room that's next to the SCIF, you can't drill into the walls or anything like that to put things up or whatever because you might damage that Faraday cage, right? There's no reason that hundreds of years in the future we wouldn't have even better Faraday cages for the SCIF. But it's even dumber because she's remote piloting this synthetic in there in the same SCIF that also has this Rogue AI project where the Rogue AI is deliberately designed to like take over things without, over channels where information's not supposed to go. It's like, it took over. It got a couple of it put a copy of itself into this barcode scanner. It's literally a barcode scanner, right? It's like beep beep beep, and then he puts it on the charger, and then it infects the charger, and then from the charger it hops to the rest of the computers. I mean, this virus thing is transferring data and control over channels that it's not supposed to be able to. That it's not supposed to expected to be able to do that, and they put her with the remote controlled dude in the same SCIF as this thing, and don't expect something horrible to happen. So setting that aside, here's the interesting bit. The company, Weyland-Yutani, wants aliens as weapons, and that is consistent, right? Weyland-Yutani has shown interest in using aliens as weapons. The bioweapons division, blah 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 blah, over and over and over again. And that's Blue's official job. But here's the catch. She's actually trying to figure out a way to use the aliens to figure out a way to turn part of their life cycle into a medical application, basically super rapid genetic gene therapy. So in order for that to work, Alex White has to make a change to the alien life cycle for this book. In this book, the facehuggers don't pop out an embryo into your chest, which is what they've always been said to be doing in the other books and in the other movies and stuff like that. No. What they pop out is actually a bit of like some kind of primordial kind of sludge that contains like a virus or something in it that is capable of very rapidly reconfiguring the DNA of anything it gets into, anything organic it gets into. In the mainline movies, the aliens take the shape of whatever they gestated in for some reason. It's never really clear, right? Like there's the humanoid aliens in Alien 1 and Aliens. There's the dog-like alien in Alien 3, and it's not really clear why this is the case, but Alex White actually creates a reason for this to be the case. Namely, that it's not an embryo that the facehuggers are popping into something. It's something that grabs some of their DNA, reconfigures it into its own thing, edits it to make it into the ultimate predator, and then, you get the chest burster, yada, yada, yada. But of course, this raises the question, why would you create a chest burster when you can reconfigure DNA really, really quickly? Couldn't you just take over the original creature and kind of reform it? That would be the way that you would expect to do that. It's a cool and interesting and innovative change to the life cycle, but in the end, it kind of makes things make a little bit less sense. Because it's way easier to... Like eating food is a metabolistic process that requires your body to itself expend a lot of energy. It's inefficient, right? And so for the alien, while being capable of rapid DNA changes in living organisms, to create the chest burster and then have the chest burster eat the person is much less efficient, ostensibly, or hypothetically, than simply altering the DNA of the creature itself to turn it into the alien would be more efficient, you would think, but that's not how it goes. And so there's kind of a tension there of like, oh, this is a cool idea, and it's new, and it helps explain something that was never really explained that well in the movies, but also it doesn't make a whole lot of sense itself because it has a wall that doesn't need to be there, right? The wall between creating a chest burster and simply altering the DNA of the host into something that would become the alien. So Blue is trying to get this... There's something weird about the way this virus works in the facehugger, right? Like, you only have access to the virus for like a very short period of time. There's a point in the book where they are using a facehugger on a chimp, and then they like flash freeze the chimp and try to get the virus out. And even 12 seconds after delivery of the payload, it's no use to them anymore. That's never very well explained. There's a little bit of technobabble about that, but it's not particularly convincing. But like, another problem, right, is that the facehugger life cycle is that the facehugger turns one person, and then that person turns into an alien, and then maybe you get an alien hive out of that somehow, right? But, like, if all the facehugger is doing is delivering this DNA reconfiguring virus, why would you have a life cycle that limits one facehugger to one victim? If you're dealing with some kind of DNA reconfiguring virus, why not split that payload among several victims per facehugger? You'd have something other than a facehugger instead. Why is this, why doesn't that work? Why have we never seen cases of that happening? Again, Alex White tries to technobabble out of this, but it's kind of plot convenient and not very convincing. So basically, the thing that's happening is that while Blue is being paid to turn the aliens into a weapon, she's also trying to understand and capture this DNA reconfiguring virus to fix her genetic disease and other people's genetic diseases, which makes her less sociopathic, but she's still kind of messed up. And of course, everything goes to hell. The Silver Smile virus gets out and starts wreaking havoc on the space station. The synth that Blue is piloting also gets remote controlled by Dorian Sudler, and he like gives it some weird command, and then we kind of get a cutaway, and it's not clear exactly what it does, but it seems like it has some kind of role in the further downfall of the station. Surprisingly, this happens less than halfway through the book. Like, I literally was like, I was looking at the book, and I was like, here. You can see the difference here. Like, this is what I have read. This is what I had not read at the time. I'm like, this book seems like it's almost over. And surprisingly, it was not. What ends up happening is that we get a massive expansion of the last few hours of the station's, existence. And it turns into kind of like a cross between like the worst alien living hell and Die Hard, which, I don't understand how that worked, but like Blue Marsalis has this genetic disease that has basically made her bedridden. She can barely move. She can hardly speak. She can't walk. She can hardly move her fingers. Like, most of her interactions with other people have been through this synthetic person. And yet, when everything goes to hell and the aliens take over the station and the station itself is falling into the star and all this stuff is going on and there's decompression events and yada yada yada, somehow Blue Marsalis takes like 10 times as much damage as Bruce Willis takes in Die Hard, and she still is like up and trucking by the end of the book, which is really like, I mean, it's hard, it's very hard to believe that someone would be able to take this much punishment in the condition that she was already in and, you know, still keep moving along. It's plot convenient, but, you know, that's what it is. And of course, at the same time, while everything is going to hell, Suttler also wants to survive and escape. There's this subplot with a rival company that offers escape to Blue if she gives them some kind of a sample. And, you know, the expansion of these 2 to 4 hours of action at the end of the book into over 200 pages is actually a really amazing achievement by Alex White. Like, I don't want to try to take that away from him because it's really actually well done. Like, you know, you've gone through a good chunk of the book with things kind of, oh yeah, this happened, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. Then all of a sudden, every single individual second is plotted, you know, in graphic detail. And not only that, we also get some hops around of POV from, oh, we're going to have Blue's POV, we're going to have Suttler's POV, we're going to have Anne's POV. There's a few there's a few minor characters that have some effect on the story, but those two are the main ones. All kinds of crazy stuff happens as the space station is dying. You know, there's tons of gore, there's lots of double crossing as the crew fight to escape, and, you know, they're all pretty much sociopaths, so it's pretty easy to get them to fight each other, and some of them are already inclined to fight other ones and so on. You get a lot of personal baggage BS where it's like, oh, this person doesn't like this person, and now this is the opportunity for them to whatever. All kinds of that stuff is happening. They're trying to, like, fix the computers with the Silver Smile virus on them. They're trying to contain the aliens. That fails too. Everything goes to hell. Suffice it to say, there's a ton of stuff that goes on in the second half of the book that actually is a pretty good action story. We get away from the kind of we get away from the I don't even know what you would call it. Like, the first half of the book is a corporate stop-loss guy and a doctor that's an embezzling doctor, right? But embezzling for a good reason. And so the beginning of the first half of the book is all kind of this interpersonal stuff. And it's really dark and manipulative and kind of gross in a lot of ways. And then we get the second half of the book, which is just intense action for like 200 pages. And it's pretty well done, surprisingly. You know, the book gave me that bad first impression, but then when I got to the halfway point, I'm like, this book seems like it's done. And then, you know, the second half of the book was just like nonstop action, and so I just kept turning pages. So all of this, you know, you get a lot of, in the second half of the book, you get lots of tension and then like plots and counterplots. You get action and aliens running around and the details of that, people trying to survive and escape, different ways people are reacting to the aliens, and that all part's done pretty well, actually. Unfortunately, it all kind of culminates in a rather meh ending, kind of a nothing ever changes kind of ending, and that's how the book ends, which again is kind of what's the word? It ends not with a bang, but with a whimper. But there is a pretty long bang through the second half of the book. So with that, I think that's about all I want to talk about in the spoiler section. Let's move on to the conclusion. So, in conclusion, I have mixed feelings about this book. It has above competent prose, marred by unlikable characters and an incredibly unlikely plot. You know, on one hand, it makes a bad first impression. On the other hand, the second half of the book is a very skillful expansion of a very complex and detailed action scene in almost a surprising way. I like the fact that Alex White plays around with the alien life cycle and does something different with it, which is a cool idea. At the same time, there's not that much done with it, and, you know, if this is just a one-off novel, I don't know if Alex White wrote any sequel novels to this, and you know, considering that it's in the Alien universe, his stuff is always going to be kind of relegated to like a like a side canon, if you will, right? Like, yeah, there's some cool ideas in here, but unfortunately, they're never going to be. They would have to be used in a way that didn't that set them aside from like the existing Alien movie canon, because they would totally ruin a bunch of the stuff that happens in those movies and makes them make no sense. And probably the studios that handle the Alien franchise are not going to do that. They might, and they might do it skillfully, or they might, as we've seen in recent years with a lot of these things, do it very unskillfully. What I'll say is that if you like or can tolerate super edgy characters and settings, and if you like aliens, you might want to read this book. Otherwise, I would probably give it a pass. I don't know. It's one of those things where it made a bad impression, and then it kind of made up for itself in the second half. But at the end, it felt like it felt like it didn't make as much sense as it wanted to, and the ending didn't didn't make me go like, oh, this is a really cool ending. It was just like, oh, okay, war never changes, effectively. So yeah, I don't know. Mixed feelings on Alien: The Cold Forge, but and despite all the criticism that I've said of it, and despite my general dislike of like super edgy characters and stuff, I did end up reading the whole thing in like a day and a half. So I don't know, or maybe it was even less than that. Maybe I read the whole thing in one day. I don't know. Like what started out as a, hey, I'm going to read this for 10 minutes just to see if there's anything good in here, and then getting like, oh, this isn't actually that good, turned into, I'm going to sit down and read the whole thing. So I don't know. Maybe that means something about me and my subconscious that I'm not aware of, but that's where I ended up. So yeah, I mean, again, solid prose, interesting plot that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, sociopathic characters that nevertheless do a few interesting things, and some fun ideas with lore. If that sounds like something that'd be up your alley, I would say go check it out. Otherwise, I would say you might want to go check out some other Alien books. Or maybe even, again, the Alien series has always been kind of a edgy, cutthroat thing on some level here and there. So, if you don't like that stuff on some level, you probably will give the Alien series a miss. But I don't know. That's what I've got on Alien: The Cold Forge. And so yeah, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.